At the beginning of the film, we see Julia and her partner, both scientists. They were conducting experiments in a snow-covered area where they had to place bombs in icy water and cause a few explosions. Then, at the same time, a call came from headquarters warning them that a massive storm was heading toward their location, and they needed to leave immediately. Russian submarine passing nearby also detected some strange and loud noises, but they couldn't make sense of it either. The most surprising thing was that the sea waves were rising from the bottom, upward. Julia's scanners started behaving strangely, and the snow around her camp began cracking rapidly. Julia wanted to grab her research papers before leaving, but the storm was already too close. Her partner scientist pulled her onto the snowmobile, and they tried to escape, but the ground started breaking beneath them. Meanwhile, the submarine captain realized the sound they were hearing was from a living creature, and they immediately tried to escape. But suddenly, a gigantic creature in the water collided with the submarine. Julia and her partner were speeding across the cracking ice. But unfortunately, the snowmobile, their only means of escape, crashed violently, caught fire, and sank into the freezing water. The explosions from their experiment blew the entire camp apart, and the remaining scientists slowly drowned. The submarine was also taking heavy damage. The crew struggled to hold their positions as the vessel shook violently. After a lot of effort, they managed to fire a flare that illuminated enormous tentacles emerging from the water. Then, a man was thrown against the glass screen, flung away, and lost consciousness before the submarine completely sank. An officer sent out an emergency signal, and news of the disappearance quickly reached the Russian Navy headquarters. Because the submarine carried highly classified weapons, they decided either to rescue it or, if not possible, destroy it. The scientist leading this mission was Victor, the brother of the submarine's missing captain. His family was terrified that Victor might also disappear like his brother. His mother, deeply worried, gave him his late father's watch, telling him it would protect him wherever she was. She would watch over him. That night, when Victor reached the docks, he learned that his father's old friend, a senior officer, was also joining the mission. Victor was concerned for him because of his age. Soon, everyone in the crew boarded the submarine. Meanwhile, Julia and her companion were wandering through the blizzard, trying to catch a signal. Julia nearly fell into a deep pit, but her companion saved her just in time. Suddenly, Julia's device picked up an oil rig signal. A team drilling for oil somewhere out in the sea managed to make a call. But because of the storm, the connection was full of static and noise, and the rig team couldn't understand her. Soon, the signal cut off. Julia's partner, exhausted and hopeless, fired a flare into the sky and sat down in the snow. The next morning, Victor's submarine reached the last known location of the missing vessel. After thorough preparation, they dove underwater. The crew noticed that the senior officer took Victor to a private room where several higher-ups were already waiting. They handed Victor a report, which shocked everyone present. Rumors of the missing submarine soon spread. On the other side, Julia and her partner found a buoy stuck in the snow, a signal device used to send distress signals to nearby ships. Hope returned, and they decided to stay near it, believing someone would eventually find them. The submarine later picked up the buoy's signal and changed course toward it. As they approached, a pod of whales began swimming around the vessel. The crew tried to descend carefully to avoid harming them. One whale accidentally struck the propeller. A senior officer ordered the sonar to be activated, but Victor disagreed. Sonar helps in communication, navigation, and detecting underwater objects through sound waves. When activated, the whales swam away briefly, but moments later, they returned. The crew was confused by this strange behavior. Suddenly, all the whales fled as the seafloor began to rise. A massive tentacle appeared in the darkness, striking and killing all the whales with a single blow. The submarine's sonar detected something enormous moving toward them. The senior officer thought it might be an enemy vessel and ordered the crew to open fire. But Victor refused and told them to hide. The submarine collided with an icy wall, causing cracks to spread through the hull. The sonar's beeping intensified, hurting the ears of those wearing headsets. When the unknown creature finally left, the crew sighed in relief. While assessing the damage, the senior officer scolded Victor for taking unnecessary risks. They had no choice now but to surface for repairs. Meanwhile, Julia and her partner were lying close together under some rocks to stay warm. Suddenly, they heard the cracking of ice. The submarine was surfacing. The crew spotted them and immediately rescued them. The senior officer suspected they might be enemy spies and ordered that they be left behind after being given some food. But Victor felt compassion and decided to bring them aboard. Once repairs were complete, the submarine dove back underwater to search near the buoy. After a medical checkup and meal, Victor showed Julia a map and asked where her camp was and whether she had seen anything unusual. Julia replied they had witnessed massive explosions. Hearing this, Victor suspected those explosions might have caused his brother's submarine to sink. The crew discussed their next move. The senior officer wanted to retreat, fearing another encounter with the creature. But Victor, desperate to find his brother, ordered the crew to head toward Julia's camp. The senior officer warned him this was his second reckless decision. One more mistake could doom them all. Victor told a colleague they had to hurry because if anyone in the missing submarine was still alive, their oxygen would be running out. Julia suddenly heard a strange sound and panicked. But her partner reassured her it was the sonar from their search for the other submarine. Soon, the radar showed that the creature was following them again. Victor told the crew to find a place to hide, but this time there was none. Then they spotted an oil rig nearby. Victor decided to surface near it. As they did, the oil rig workers saw massive tentacles rising from the sea and immediately sounded the alarm. The Kraken began attacking, destroying the entire rig with explosions and chaos. Workers tried to flee, but the collapsing structure left them trapped. Victor watched in horror through the periscope as the creature annihilated the rig. He broadcast the footage across the submarine so the crew could see the enemy they were facing. When the rig was completely destroyed, the Kraken turned toward the submarine again. The senior officer took over command and ordered 2 torpedoes to be fired. Both hit the target directly, and the officer proudly declared the monster dead until a crew member shouted that it was still alive and approaching even faster. A third torpedo was fired, hitting again but failing to kill the beast. The Kraken attacked relentlessly, striking the submarine with its tentacles. The impact caused massive internal damage. Computers short-circuited, crew members were injured, and one man was crushed under falling equipment. The missile section caught fire, and the crew sealed off the area to prevent the fire from spreading. 7 people stayed behind to extinguish it, but the Kraken struck again, shaking the submarine violently. The radar showed that the creature had surrounded them. It was the Kraken, a colossal sea monster from ancient legends, a gigantic octopus feared by sailors for centuries. With only one missile left, Victor decided to switch to silent mode. Because marine creatures hunt using sound, he ordered the crew to stop all noise. Even the fire extinguishers. The rising CO and CO levels made breathing difficult, and some began to panic. But the plan worked. The Kraken moved away. When they resumed work, the fire had spread too much to control. Victor ordered everyone to evacuate the burning section, sealing it off to contain the flames. Injured crew members were treated by Julia and her partner, earning them the crew's trust. Later, Victor asked the crew what to do next. Most wanted to return home, fearing they couldn't survive another Kraken attack. The senior officer reminded Victor of his father's heroism and urged him to act wisely. After some thought, Victor agreed they would go back. As they turned around, Victor read his father's final letter. Julia entered his cabin with a map, showing where she had seen the Kraken and her camp's location. According to her, ancient legends said the Kraken once attacked many ships before vanishing. Scientists believed it went into deep sleep. Their explosions might have awakened it. If we want to survive, she said, we must stop using sonar or it will come for us again. Since Julia knew so much about the creature, Victor asked if she knew where his brother's submarine might be. Julia said the Kraken drags its prey to its lair near her camp. Just then, an officer interrupted. The sonar had picked up knocking sounds from metal nearby. It meant survivors. Tracking the signal, they confirmed the sounds were coming from near Julia's camp. Victor gathered the crew and declared, our men are trapped down there, fighting for their lives. If we don't save them, who will? I'm not doing this just for my brother. Any one of you, I'd do the same. The crew agreed, and they set course for Julia's camp. As they descended deeper, bolts popped out of the walls, glass shattered, and the submarine shook violently. They had entered deep waters. They rose slightly to stabilize, but an officer noticed they had reached an unknown area. Victor decided to deploy a mini-submarine to explore. Since the pilot was injured, Victor volunteered to go himself with 2 officers. Leaving the senior officer in command, the mini-sub descended into the abyss, groaning under immense pressure. Strange metallic sounds echoed. Time was running out, they had to find something soon. Then they spotted it. Thousands of sunken ships littered the seafloor. Julia's theory was true. The Kraken had attacked countless vessels and dragged them here. Finally, they found the missing submarine. Its front section was intact, meaning survivors might be inside. They the mini-sub and managed to connect after several failed attempts. Victor put on a diving suit and entered the damaged submarine. To his relief, he found his brother, Alexander, and the surviving crew alive. He immediately informed the main vessel, and everyone celebrated. He sent as many people as the mini-sub could carry, planning 2 trips. Victor stayed behind with Alexander. He attached a tracker to the hull, but then turned it off, realizing the Kraken could detect it as the mini-sub left. The larger submarine trembled again, but didn't collapse. Soon, the rescued crew reached the main submarine safely. However, the mini-sub pilot was too weak for a second trip. Julia's partner, who had prior submarine experience, volunteered to replace him as the mini-sub set off again. The senior officer saw on the radar that the Kraken was moving. Meanwhile, Victor and Alexander were searching for the classified weapons inside the wreck. They retrieved a code from a safe, but couldn't activate the computer system. Victor kept pressing keys until the computer finally powered up, revealing that the weapons were still operational. At that same time, the mini-sub detected signals from the weapons and followed them to Victor's location, but the Kraken was closing in on the main submarine. The crew dove deeper and switched to silent mode. The Kraken hurled a massive rock, damaging the hull and flooding a compartment. Terrifying everyone inside. The mini-sub reached Victor's location, but when it moved closer, its tracker accidentally turned on. The Kraken, about to attack the main submarine, sensed the signal and turned toward its lair. The senior officer ordered the crew to surface while the creature was distracted. Meanwhile, Victor and Alexander were preparing the weapons for manual detonation. The Kraken reached them, its tentacles wrapping around the wreck. The brothers exchanged apologies for their past conflicts and steeled themselves for the final stand. The Kraken tore off half the submarine, but it was an empty section. As it prepared to strike again, the brothers pressed the button together, launching the weapons. Water began rushing in. Victor ran back to save Alexander, and as the submarine sank, waves separated them. Victor saw his brother's hand reaching out of the water, grabbed it, and pulled him to safety. They climbed the stairs, sealed the door, and waited. With only 2 minutes until detonation, their mini-sub wasn't launching. Victor spotted an emergency lever and pulled it, detaching the mini-sub from the wreck. They escaped just before the weapons exploded. Massive waves spun their small vessel violently. On the main submarine, the crew waited in despair, believing the brothers had perished. Then bubbles appeared, the mini-sub surfaced safely, cheers erupted. The crew praised Victor's leadership and the brothers' bravery. When they returned home, their mother, who had been waiting anxiously, saw her sons alive and broke into tears of joy. The family reunited, smiling through relief and pride, and with that, the story ends.